So if you have questions, we're just going to open it up and just ask questions, and maybe we'll have a dialogue. What questions do you have?
Share with us what you consider to be the strengths and weaknesses of getting your master's at a terminal MA institution versus getting your MA at a PhD institution, and what the heck is a terminal degree anyway?
That's a great question. I have very strong opinions about this.
I thought you might.
I prefer a terminal master's before a master's rollover program. And let me explain what that means. A terminal master's is one in which the program doesn't have a PhD. It's sort of the last degree you can achieve. And there's some more specifics related to that, but that's generally what it means. It's the last degree that program offers. A lot of PhD programs will have MA programs built into the system, and you get the MA along the way, but your final goal is a PhD. I really like MA terminal programs where the MA is the last one. I went to one, Texas Tech. Your program is a terminal master's. And I think it's really important. I really stress this with our own undergrads because for a couple of reasons. First, with a terminal master's, you get more connections. You're going to be working with faculty in an MA program who only care about you, right? Who only care about the undergraduates and the master's students. And they're going to put all of their emphasis into you. They need research help. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to the MA students, right? At a PhD rollover type program, you're not going to get as much of that. In fact, all of the extra sort of work, the extra connections, are going to go to the doc programs. My spouse did her master's at the University of Kansas, and then we left for Ohio for her PhD. And she noticed that, right? I was at Kansas with both Eric and Telena. The extra work, the extra incentives went to the doc program, the doc kids first, right, before the MA students. And so an MA terminal program like your program, like ours at Western, like where I went at Texas Tech, we get all the emphasis as a program. If there's extra funding, if there's extra awards, it goes to the MA students. It's really hard for an MA student to sort of stand out as a doctoral program in the middle. Additionally, you're seeing sort of a trend right now where a lot of doc programs are getting rid of their MA. Ohio, I think, for example, Stephanie, right? Ohio, for example, still has an MA program, but they're not really taking many people in that at all. You have to be a standout student, and even then it's like one or two, because they're having to put all their emphasis, because of shortage of resources, on their doctoral students. So it's a great question. I really love terminal programs. I think that's the best route to go. It gives you far more connections in your professional career. So thank you, John. Other questions? Yes?
You might have answered this before I got here, but what is your research focus? Is it still the student teacher?
It is, but I keep trying to leave it, but I can't. It started out, and I still do a lot of student teacher. I'm moving much more into human-robot communication. Robots, like when you read every article sort of in popular press, robots are here. They're taking over. There's hospitals probably in Missouri that use robots, nursing robots. And then Michigan State, for example, has nursing robots. The University of Michigan has nursing robots. And so we're seeing robots sort of increase dramatically. And so I was really interested in how do we interact with robots. And the same things apply. There's a theory called computers as social actors out of Stanford. And it's this notion that we treat computers as the same. Who in here loves their phone? Right? I love my phone. If I can't find my phone, I feel like I'm having a relationship meltdown. I go crazy, right? Does anyone in here name their phone or name a computer or something like that? Be honest. You think about it fondly. What do you name it?
Well, it's kind of cheesy, but it's just if my phone's a Galaxy, but I say like, hi Galaxy.
Hi Galaxy, right? The research of Stanford and ours in our lab has shown that we treat technology, we treat computers like they're people. We talk to them, right? And then Apple with Siri is just capitalizing on that, right? We talk to Siri. We treat her as, in the United States, her, and in Europe as a Mel. We treat them as real things. And the research has found that when you treat a computer that way, you talk to it differently. So for example, if I was to have two laptops, just take my laptop and this laptop, put a Missouri State sticker on one, who's the big rival? Mizzou. I agree. Put a Mizzou one on the bottom. My apologies. I'm from Kansas. I'm allowed to say that. We would treat you would treat the Missouri State computer nicer than you would treat the computer with that tiger on it, right? And so our research has sort of gone to that into notions of robotics on how do we interact with robots? Do we treat robots as human? If we have a small robot, do we sort of treat it as a child versus a tall robot? Do we treat it with more respect, credibility, and those type of measures? And so that's sort of where my research has been going lately. The problem with robots in communication, robots are extremely expensive. So and it's hard to get grants in our field in robotics because you're not building the robot. So we have to use stuff off the shelf, programs that we can manipulate. We use a lot of Wizard of Oz experimentation where ours isn't a real robot. It's a telepresence robot controlled via Skype. But we have programs, and through careful cameras, live cameras, we make it appear as it's an artificial intelligent robot. We have a study at Central States that's coming up in April where it was a teacher robot. And the students believed it was a real robot lecturing about business and professional speaking. And they would try and ask it questions. We controlled for that, but yeah, it's hard to do, but that's where we're heading. So, good question. Stephanie.
I really enjoyed your presentation, and I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on, I know one thing we talk with graduate students a lot about is what can you do with this? What kind of job could you get with your terminal MA if you're not interested in pursuing a PhD or you're not interested in pursuing a PhD right away?
Right.
And one thing I always talk about is the great thing about a comm degree is that it's very flexible and gives you a lot of options, but the con of the comm degree is that it's very flexible and it gives you a lot of options, so you really have to translate that and figure out where you want to take it. What kind of advice do you give your grad students?
That's a good question. I'll answer it sort of two different ways. We end up with most of our program is a PhD feeder program, but we do have some students that are interested in teaching at community college, stuff like that. So we still stress research in that. Because if you are interested in teaching at a community college, the best single way to get the job besides being a good teacher is to be able to demonstrate you can do research. You may not have to do research for that job. I still think you should, but you may not have to, but to being able to demonstrate that you can. For those who aren't interested in the academy at all, an MA program helps with that flexibility in some ways. You're able to show that you can do some type of research in a professional setting that can help the client, can help the company, can help the industry that you're working for. And so the trick is to figure out what you're passionate about, what area you're passionate about, and then how to strategically brand yourself with an MA in communication that you can go into that industry and do that. I think the two speakers, if you saw them yesterday, were brilliant at showing how they had done that in their career. Because let's face it, when you go to look at like jobs, you still don't see a lot of degrees out there that say, seeking an MA in communication. But what you do see, organizational behavior, someone that can deal with small groups. And so it's a way of strategically placing yourself to where you fit those type of calls for jobs. And the MA is a great way because of that focused study. You're able to sort of narrow yourself down, but still keep a lot of flexibility that you can shift around and that you can sort of navigate that marketplace a little bit. So it's being broad but narrow at the same time.
You made a good point about you've got to love your program, but there are times when you hate your program.
Right.
What are your strategies for getting yourself over that hump?
That's a good one. I'm probably not the best person to talk because I tell our students, if you hate our program, we'll help you find somewhere else. We had a student, for example, who was at the University of Denver in his doctoral program, didn't like it, just did not like it. Nothing against them, he just didn't like the program. And we're like, we're going to help you get somewhere else. And so within the next semester, he had full funding at Wayne State. If you don't like your program, maybe the program's not a good fit for you, or maybe you're not a good fit for the program. And it's not personal, right? Like, I hate Donald Trump's slogan, it's just business or not personal. Whatever the slogan is, I don't watch the show. But the notion is finding your own place and where you fit in. Now, maybe it is something minor, right? Maybe you just aren't clicking with your advisor. Go find it, get another advisor, right? Most people don't care. I mean, if I have a student and they don't like me as their advisor, I'm okay with that. I'll help you find someone that's a better fit for your needs, what you want to do, your expertise. And so it's being okay to just step back and evaluate, I think. Is this a good program for me? Is it a good fit for my needs? Or am I a good fit for it? Or if it's just personnel, like should I just have a different committee or should I find different classes? And in MA Terminal, I think as MA Terminal programs, we're pretty sensitive to that, I think. and we don't take offense. There's not a lot of egos usually in these type of programs, right? And so I'm more than happy to shift someone over, and your faculty are the same. So
To piggyback on that, Chad, I think that when you're applying to a graduate program, the school is just as much in the hot seat as you are, and they're trying to sell themselves to you.
exactly.
So right now, the letters are coming out, acceptance to graduate schools. What are some things that future graduate students should be asking those schools when they go on interviews? What are the things they should be looking for to find that good fit in a program?
First visit. Either visit before the offer or visit right after the offer. You have to imagine yourself living there, right? You have to imagine yourself walking the halls. Could I fit in as a student here? The second thing, I would talk to them about sort of their capstone projects. Maybe you are interested in going into professional field afterwards. There are some MA programs that don't have professional type projects. It's strictly thesis or classes. That may not be a good fit. So figure out how you can craft yourself. If you're a teaching assistant, I would definitely ask about funding for conferences, funding for research projects, what resources are available that you could tap into. And so it's about figuring out, am I a good fit, but are they a good fit for me? Because we all have differences, right? And are they going to support me in what I want to do? Now, at the same time, there's no MA program that's a perfect fit, if we're honest, right? You're going to have to give up some stuff for some other good stuff. And you've got to figure out what that stuff you want to give up, that's okay to give up, is worth, right? And how you can negotiate that. Good question. Yes?
Just to piggyback on that, if for some reason you can't go visit a campus, and that may not be possible in some instances.
Of course.
You should ask them, could they give you the names of 3 current graduate students, their email addresses, phone numbers, so that you could call and talk to them. And if the answer to that is no, you probably shouldn't go to that
Right.
program.
Exactly.
They should be willing to let you know who's in that program and
Exactly.
you can call. Or you can go to the website and you can look up oftentimes who are listed there under staff as teaching assistants and email those people and call them and say, hey, I have an offer, I'm thinking of coming, what do you think of the program? And those are oftentimes the most objective, insightful recommendations because, they'll tell you what the straight skinny is on.
And I might even go a step further. I would ask those 3 people, hey, could you give me a name or 2? Because I know as a program we'll put out, like, these are our grad students we want to represent us, right? And they will be straight shooters in terms of that. But if you ask for more names, more information is only going to help you. It's only going to help you understand the program. That's a really good point, John. Yeah.
As president of Central, you kind of look out at the landscape, the horizon.
Yeah.
In terms of the discipline, is this a good time for people to go on getting their PhDs? I know it goes in cycles.
Right.
The year I came out, it was a great time. People were dying or retiring, so there were lots of openings.
No, exactly.
Other times, the market is really
Job.
not very good. So, what does the job market look, in the next 5, 10 years when
That's an
these people
excellent
might be
question.
coming out?
I think there's 2 ways to go about it. First is just the general state of higher ed, right? I think we sort of hit that bottom and maybe we're going up. It feels like Missouri has, I think Michigan has. We're on an upward trend, which is actually a good thing if you're interested in going on. Because I think there have been a lot of people that put off retiring from the academy in the last, say, 6-7 years because of the economics. I know, for example, our director, who's now director emeritus, stayed on as faculty for a few years when the economy hit, when it crashed. And then when it picked back up, he retired. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot of retirements in the next, say, 10 years that are going to help the job market, as long as states and public institutions are still funding at some basic level. But most universities have figured out a way to work around that, I think, at some level. I know my home institution, we've lost $60 million in the last 4 years. And now our budget at Western is around $500 million, and the state only contributes about $90 million. I mean, there's serious talk of us maybe breaking away from the state. University of Michigan's definitely considering that. And so that's going to be interesting in terms of hiring. But also, we're at a really interesting time in communication. Forever, it was film, video, media, and then communication studies sort of proper. Interpersonal, public relations, small groups. We are seeing all sorts of mixture now. If you're able to position yourself as someone that can do mass personal communication, which is a combination of sort of mass communication and interpersonal communication, you can sell yourself for the job market, whether it's in industry, whether it's in the professoriate. And so it's figuring out ways to bring in some of that media stuff back into sort of the core, what we would call core communications content, and ways of mixing. So if you're interested in social media, it's not a fad, it's not going away, it's only exponentially increasing, right? If you're around any little kid any amount of time, you realize that they know how to do more stuff on computers or phones than you could ever dream of. If I need to know how to edit a movie, like a little film, I'll ask my 7-year-old and she can help me. If I need to know how to design an Instagram study, I'll ask our 17-year-old because she understands Instagram in ways I don't. What she doesn't have, though, are the theoretical basis for understanding the methods we're testing. But in terms of just the content, they get it. And so if you're able to merge those content areas together into media studies with interpersonal, which is what I'd call myself now, or instructional, you're able to create a market for yourself. Video gaming is super hot. Robots is going to take off. So there's all this sort of new convergence of technology, but we're past the point of how do we build a better computer? How do we build a better robot? How do we build a better social media system? There are people that study that. What people really want to know, what do you do with it? How do we interact with it? And I think our discipline is uniquely poised to take that challenge. Yes?
Grad school is known for being quite expensive, especially most of us. I know for me, we're going to graduate with quite a bit of debt.
Of course. Yeah.
At what point in your career did you decide it was worth seeking a master's degree?
It's a good question. I'm sure people might disagree with me on this. I would never get an MA in communication unless it was paid for. Unless you had a very specific reason, right? There are tons of programs of Masters in Communication that will pay you both your tuition and a small living salary. It's not much, right? You still eat ramen noodles a lot, but you'll pay for it. And there are too many good programs out there that are funding. I mean, every day on sort of the national listserv, there are terminal master's programs putting out calls for this year, wanting teaching assistants for next year. I mean, I think I've seen 5 in the last 3 days. And so there is money available to go onto a program. Now, if it's a situation where you're going to pay for it, I would really think about if it's going to be in the long-term value. And it still might be, right? You still can make a strong argument it is, but there's funding. You've got to worry about things like your GPA, your GRE scores, but there are places that'll pay you to go to school. And fortunately, they're everywhere, so we'd focus on that. Good question. Here.
So I did my master's degree immediately following my bachelor's, but I took 8 years off before doing PhD work. What do you think is the benefit of going immediately versus delaying before you go into a master's?
Oh, that's a good question. I went straight through, but it was for personal reasons. I needed to quickly get to the market. I think the benefit for a delay at any point is it gives you more of a chance for self-reflection. What am I really wanting to do? Committing to the doctoral program or even to an MA program, it's a lot of personal labor. It's a lot of emotional labor. And so it gives you time to think of, is this something I really want to do? I really liked the speaker yesterday. I wish I remembered her name, but she graduated and then went and got her poli-sci PhD like 10 years later or something like that. And she talked about how that gave her time to reflect. What was she really interested in? And she was really interested in sort of policy issues and women in politics. And I imagine that's what her dissertation looked at, I would guess. And so it gave her time to reflect about that. There's also an advantage for going straight through, right? I tell our students, sometimes students will be like, I think I want to take a few years off, but they know they want to go on. And usually they'll take a few years off because they're like, I want to make a little bit of money. Or I want to get in a job, make some money, and then I'll come back. You're going to be poor in grad school. Just be poor sooner rather than later. Life only gets more expensive, I've noticed, right? Our daughters are getting more expensive, not cheaper. So I think in some ways it's better to go straight through, but I think it's a personal. What values, what do you need to understand? But both work really well.
Yeah, I just also want to respond to the questions about the concerns of the cost of graduate school. Because I realize that many of you may have student debt, but if you are a competitive student, if you've got the GPA, if you've got your GRE, if you talk to the faculty here, we have assistantships in our department. They are competitive. But as the director of graduate studies over the years, if I've seen a student who is a good student, who is competitive, who wants to learn, they will find an assistantship on this campus. It may not be in the place that they would, their first choice, but if it's not the Department of Communication, which obviously would be your first choice, university communication, athletics, the alumni office, the graduate college, and it may not be available in February the 26th, but as we move along to the start of the academic year in the fall, I always get things like July 15th, we need somebody, do you know of somebody?
Right.
And it gets to the point where I say, well, my comm students already got their assistantship. So, if you're diligent, you will find an assistantship if you are a qualified student.
You've got to do well in your classes.
Yeah.
GRE needs to be reasonable, I think, and you've got to be able to seek those out, right? And talk to your faculty, because they get emails, like Randy's saying, all the time, of help, and so you can tap those resources. That's a good point. Yes?
How do you think if we want to study communication graduate school, is it still best to attend American or United States graduate school? I mean, United States is best one of the best country for academic hegemony. So, but I'm not American people. Then I want to leave United States. So
No, it makes I think it's changed a little bit recently, but there's a lot of literature to suggest graduate programs in the United States are looked at higher than many other places, because especially at the doctoral level. But if you're interested in a particular program somewhere else, that's going to suit your needs better than a place you're not particularly interested, because you're not going to find passion there. So if you're passionate about a particular country or a particular program that's not in the United States, that's just as good, because you're going to care about it more and you're going to do more to work to make it a better place. But there are opportunities for international graduate students. Travel for sure, but especially programs. I'm not as familiar though with many of them, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
There are some, yes. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the GRE a couple of times.
Yeah.
Can you kind of expand on what that is and
Sure.
what would be considered like a competitive score
Oh.
on that for admission to graduate?
Sure, the GRE, Graduate Records Examination, is like the ACT on steroids a little bit. And it's changed now, so where now you have the quantitative portion, you have a verbal portion, and then there's an essay portion. It used to be the logic portion, which was amazing. I love that much better. I love the logic. That's my best score. But so it's changed a little bit. And every program has different cutoff points. And it depends on the year. I will tell you at Western, for example, this would have been a good year to apply to our program, because we ended up with so many slots because a lot of people graduated. We're taking almost anyone if they apply, and they can sign the GRE form, and they scored 50th percentile, you're in with funding, right? And so different programs have different sort of cutoffs or bright lines. But I think that is one benefit, back to John's question about terminal MA programs. I don't think in the terminal MA program the GRE is as important as if you went to a PhD rollover program. I was a horrible undergrad. When I graduated, I'll tell you my GPA was 2.6. That is horrible. They should have never let me in the program. But it was only because of my GRE scores I was safe, because they were decently high enough, right? So the GRE saved me. But I've seen it work the other way too, and probably more often. A high GPA, okay GREs, but the GPA helps you, and you can explain the GRE. Like, I haven't taken a math class in 5 years or 4 years. I did much better on the essay and the verbal. My math is a little lower, but anyone can win math with training, right? Is what we say. And so it's figuring out how to explain if you have a low score or if your high score helps you in many ways.
I was just going to add to that. I'm pretty. I share this with a lot of my grad students, but my situation was that I had horrible standardized test scores, and this has been my life since I was in kindergarten. Oh, she's so bright, and she does so well, and then she takes a test, and she's terrible. She's a mess. So what I did when I got into both my MA or my master's program and then my PhD program, I knew this was going to be a handicap going. I knew before I even took the test. Yeah. I took it 6 times altogether. Just to try to up my score. I just met with the graduate director and said, look, here's what I'm capable of, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to study, but just so you know, I'm going to come in with a really low test score, and here's why. And so I think that sometimes you don't have to throw yourself out, you know, if you have all these other positive factors going for you, and you really want those to shine, don't underestimate actually making a personal connection with the people who are making decision makers.
And if I could add to that as well, another factor that will work in your favor is if you have low test scores or your grades are not as high as they might have been, is if you have a relationship with a faculty member who really knows what you're capable of doing. You know, I've had students ask me to write letters of recommendation for them, and I've been amazed that they're even interested in grad school because they've shown no interest in my classes whatsoever in grad school. But I've had the reverse where, you know, students have been maybe okay, but there was a spark there, and there was a willingness to go beyond the minimum, and I could write glowing letters of recommendation in that case.
Exactly.
Or piggybacking faculty will call.
Yeah.
You know, I'll call my alma mater and say, you know, I have a great student here, didn't do really well on GREs. Would you take a look at her letters of recommendation? Or you really ought to look at this person. And that's developing the kind of relationship with your faculty that makes a difference. But don't wait until the end of 4 years to develop that because it's too late.
It's too late.
I didn't know you were interested in graduate school. I didn't know you were interested in a PhD. Where were you? Because there's a checklist of things.
Why didn't you come to class?
Yeah. Or,
Present,
And I-
one of the 4 B's.
Yeah, and I like your point about gratitude because faculty do remember when they write letters of recommendation and they don't get any acknowledgement or a thank you or even find out that you got in. So if you ask for a letter of recommendation and it's given, then you say thank you because they will not forget. It'll come back and bite you.
Go buy a big box of thank you cards and just keep them in home.
And that's life. That's
Yeah.
life.
And
For
if
everything.
you get married, for heaven's sakes, let us know what your big name was. Twice this has happened. I got a request for letters of recommendation from a name I did not recognize. I don't know this person. And then later I find out that, oh yeah, in fact I do. That was a married name, but they didn't give me what the maiden name was, which would have let me recognize it right away. So make sure you identify yourself.
And there are places, now I will say this caveat, there are, if you're interested in doctoral studies, there are some doctoral programs in communication where GRE matters, where it is the cutoff. And so if you had a lower test score or an average test score, don't apply to places like Michigan State because they have cutoffs, and they have to for institutional reasons. It's very few programs, though. Maybe the Annenberg, Michigan State, UT maybe. They're very small, Ohio State a little bit. But generally, most programs you can work with, you can call them, you can have your rec letters write about you and explain test scores or low GPA in my case.
To reiterate about the letter of recommendation and everything, I went to a graduate study seminar, and I think the thing is, get to know your professors, like you said, because they can give you a letter of recommendation, and then they can give you a strong letter of recommendation, and you want that strong letter of recommendation. So it's something I learned from one of the seminars I went to, is you want a strong letter.
And as you're writing your own personal rec letter, bold and italicize those important words that you want them to stress someday, and so you can live up to that. I've one time wrote a handwritten letter. I never did it because it's too much work, but it was a student who had a lower GRE, but they'd done research, they were smart, they deserved to be in a program, so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to handwrite a letter. Hopefully they recognize this is taking time to write this, because I have horrible writing anyway. And I, of course, made a copy of a PDF and emailed it too. But it was because of the relationship, right? I knew the student. They worked with me on projects. They worked controlling our robots in the lab. They were a really good student. They just did bad on the GRE. And so think about those things. Think about, you want a strong letter. What will your faculty think is strong qualifications for you? And how do you achieve those?
So Chad, I think a lot of schools are getting to the point where they're sitting down, the faculty are sitting down and wading through those piles of applications. And so what are some things when you're going through the pile that you're going to be looking for that stand out to you among those students? So these guys have an idea of what kind of things they should be doing and putting into these to stand out from the the herd?
For a terminal master's, the first thing we look at, did they present at some type of undergraduate research conference? If they presented at Central States, or Michigan has a very small, it's not anywhere near STAM or those qualifications. If they present, we're definitely going to look at this pile. We also look at their rec letters. And you, as faculty, you've read a lot of rec letters. You know which rec letters are sort of boilerplate language rec letters versus which ones are really, they took a lot of time to craft. And so we look at those rec letters. We tend to look at GPA over GRE because we're a terminal master's, but I think that's worked in many ways. But GPA is even tricky, right? Because GPAs are not standardized from universities. I don't know your system. Do you give Fs here? We don't have Fs in Michigan, in Western Michigan. You get an E. If you fail a class, you get an E. I have no idea why this is true. I know I hear students telling their parents, hey, I got an E for excellent, like it's kindergarten. No, you failed the course, right? But so GPAs aren't standardized across institutions for the most part. So we look at the rec letters and we look to see if they did stuff outside the classroom that shows that they could succeed in grad school. And for us, that would be presenting undergraduate research. And it might be they worked on a white paper or they did a consulting PR type big project and that the company was really happy about and they wrote an email. Did they include that? So we look at those extra benefits. Because at the end of the day, the GPAs for at least our admissions are all about within a very small standard deviation. And so you have to sort of seek out those extra items.
It always amazes me. These are all communication strategies, folks. Take what you've learned in your classes and apply them to yourself. You've learned these things in interpersonal and persuasion and argumentation and public speaking. Apply them to yourself. These are the skills that make you marketable. So you know how to create in others a positive impression of you. You've learned that in school. Just apply it now to your own personal career, because that's what it's about.
If you meet with the grad students, and I'm just speaking to you, I mean, I know what goes on. You visit a school, the grad students are inevitably going to take you out. Do not get drunk with the grad students. They will go back and talk about that, right? We preach this to our own students, right? It doesn't matter if you're wherever you're at, in the hallway, at a bar, at a restaurant for prospective graduate program, you're a representation of your institution, you're also a representation of yourself. And everything is going to be a subtle difference, a perceptual difference. And so you've got to be mindful. Maybe you put like your Twitter handle on your CV, on your resume. Be mindful on what you're putting on Twitter, right? Because if it's on your resume, I'm going to go look it up and see what learn about you. Right? So you've got to always be thinking about your own social brands, social personal branding. And these are all, you're right, John, these are all things we learn in our classes. But I also think that's why I love comm students. Comm students get it in ways programs don't. I work sometimes with our psych doc programs at Western, and they don't get some of this stuff, right? They get different stuff, but they don't get sort of these basic ideas that comm majors know. You learn about this every day. So it's just utilizing that knowledge. Anything else? Well, I'll be around if you have questions. Thank you so much.